Good afternoon, traders. This is Christian from Tribeca Trade Group, and it is Thursday, December 17th. So, one more day of the trading week. Tomorrow is quadruple witching. So, I'll say this just for a quick 10-15 seconds here. Tomorrow, I would expect some volatility, big volume around the open, because that's when that's when, index futures expire on the open. And then, later in the day, we have things like, the usual monthly option expiration, which is the farthest thing I would think out of the quadruple witching that you would think about. But index rebalancing, right? All the S&P indices, all the NASDAQ indices, they all rebalance. They're all benchmarked to the close. I've gotten a couple of questions about this in terms of you see on like websites, oh, Tesla's going in on Monday. No, that's incorrect. You will see it in the indices on Monday morning, but all the trading and all that is benchmarked to tomorrow's close, right? Not on Monday morning, right? It is confusing because when you look at some of these notices that you read, you're like, oh, it happens on Monday. No, it's like effective Monday, right? That's when you'll actually like be able to go to the S&P website and see it in there. But all the changes happen tomorrow, right? And of course, the leading up to. So I'm not going to talk anymore about quadruple witching because I think I talked about that in much more detail on Monday. So go to my YouTube video on Monday, and I think I went on for about 10 to 15 minutes about quadruple witching and just some of the mechanics. So if you ever want to know like the mechanics that goes on behind the scenes, that is probably what you can watch. And the so what of this is just be mindful in your trading. Sometimes single stock traders and so forth, they don't care. They're going to just do whatever they want to do, right? But the so what for me is just be mindful of these things. Like when you look and especially like when you go through your charts, like if some of you do like weekend analysis, what I always see on Twitter, which cracks me up, is like, oh, did you see the volume in Microsoft on Friday, right? Or, oh, geez, did you see the volume in this stock on Friday? They're all going to trade multiples of normal volume, right? For the most part. Maybe there'll be a couple that don't trade that much, but you will see huge volume in names, right? And then it's the same thing. You'll hear somebody on Twitter go, wow, what was all that volume on the open? Right? So these are things like you don't want to be making, in my opinion, right? And this video is for information purposes only, not giving out any advice or recommendations. But, really, for me, just I kind of stay away from the open, right? With anything with trading, again, it's a little bit of watch your risk first, right? And then, then you can go after some return. But don't get fooled by big volume in a particular name, right? They're all going to have big volume. And then be mindful of the close, right? I always see some surprises from people. Oh, wow, what happened to this name on the close, right? That's what you're going to see. So there's no reason to be trading unless you know some information about how much of this name it has to be bought for quadruple for index rebalancing. Just stay away from the last 20 minutes of the day tomorrow, right? There's no need to kind of mess with that. That's it. There's no, and the other thing that I talked about too on Monday was, to find out all this data from the S&P, you have to spend about $1,000 to the people at S&P to get the actual data. And all they're going to do is all they do is they send you a spreadsheet. I've seen this spreadsheet before. About what's happening, and all that information was released to Friday, right? And all the brokers sift through that data and put on some trades and pre-position for that stuff. So that's the bottom line for tomorrow. I wouldn't get too wrapped up in really anything else. Now, let's talk a little bit about the market. So I spent more than 15 seconds about that. I apologize. But hey, I know information and I try to give it out in these videos. The theme of the day for the markets is just another lovely day in the markets. I mean, the small caps are just unbelievable, up another 1.2%. And all the other indices too, didn't really move too much during the session, right? I always look at this percentage change from the open. Really, a lot of the move happened in the overnight markets. Again, for the for the SPYs, the Qs, diamonds. Really where the money or where it moved around a little bit more was in the small caps, and kind of interesting too because I think they around the open they were a little bit weak, but Anyway, home builders very strong today. Kind of interesting. We could look at a couple of these charts here. For the home builders, they were kind of looking a little bit weak, right? And it's kind of funny that the way that this market has been is some areas of the markets. Sometimes they look like they might actually break down, and then all of a sudden they kind of come to life a little bit. So I'm not sure if we're going to see a ton of strength in the home builders, right? This is a little bit off the back of Lennar, right? And what that means again for me, like I took a trade in Pulte earlier. It got to the top of value, and I dumped. I was long some calls, and I dumped them on the close. Could I be missing out on a move to this 47.80 VPOC? I could, right? And sometimes I do that. But again, every day I try to square up my risk and where I want exposure and where I don't. But I'll be watching this group tomorrow, considering it's been pretty dormant, right? Here's XHB. Actually, this ETF is a little bit different than ITB because it has more of the retail, right? Even though it's called the Home Builders ETF, it's actually has less home builders in it than the ITB ETF, right? I think there's like 65% home builders in the ITB, even though it's called the Home Construction, and in XHB it's only like 20%. It's really odd, but you've got names like Home Depot, which made a nice move over the last couple of days. Lowe's actually didn't really do too much. It was a name I almost jumped into earlier in the week, but it's not so much there. In fact, if you look at some of these names, right? If you look at the movers in this group, so again, just looking at something a little bit different. BLD was up 8.7%. You did see, many of those home builders itself were actually up decently, but you did have things like FBHS and OC doing pretty well. The flooring names have been absolutely on fire. And all of them, right? Lumber Liquidators, which I view as kind of the worst one in the group, but Trex has been out. But yeah, the Floor and Decor has been the strongest. So anyway, we'll see if we see some more strength. I don't know why they wouldn't continue to kind of rally, and it was kind of like a little bit of a head scratcher why this group was trailing a little bit and going sideways for a good couple of months. But maybe they take that next leg higher, right, and start to get going a little bit. So I wanted to cover that group because I thought that was, it's definitely notable that this group perked up today and on the strong housing data as well. So you kind of got a double positive catalyst. Lennar earnings and home data that was positive this morning. But if you look at some of these groups, the software names were strong again. Clean energy names were strong again. Biotech, which was a little bit of a laggard yesterday, was strong. The retail, again, it's. I mean, look at this. Look at the XRT ETF. It has broken out too. So again, just a good market breadth again. I was on Bloomberg earlier, and they always want to know like what your thoughts are on the market first before you give them a trade idea. And I think we all know at this point, right, that the market has been we've made a really nice move for the last couple months. I don't try to time tops. I don't try to, same thing with the bottoms as well. I try to stick with these trends for as long as they last. And meanwhile, be cognizant of how much risk I'm carrying, right? And that's another thing. Like there was a question, I always seem to get these questions at the end of the day in the trading room about, hey, well, do you think the stimulus deal once it gets passed, do you think that will be a sell the news, or do you think that we'll get some volatility with quadruple witching? I mean, at this point, right, it could be anything, right? We've been pretty much, and I've said this now for a week. I sound like a little bit of a broken record, but that you're just not going to be able to time when the market decides to sell off a little bit, right? It really could be anything. I'll give you an example, right? FedEx, decent looking chart, kind of hung out here, wasn't stretched into earnings. Why is it down? Who knows why it's down, right? Notice that it took out that VPOC at 297, by the way, on the upside. Right, so this is from this. Remember, we talked about virgin point of controls. You can go to yesterday's video if you want to know more about what a VPOC is. But there's another good example of one. Right, how does that happen? You think that's by accident? That 297, right? But so the only thing from the headlines that came out with FedEx, they basically said that they're not providing guidance, but everything was pretty positive that FedEx said. So why is it down? Well, because maybe there's just no more incremental buyers right now, right? And we're going to get to that point, right? And that's my point. So I think that one of the hardest things for a newer trader, the place to get to, is not to kind of just overthink things and say, oh, what could it be tomorrow where the market sells off? Really, I have no idea, right? I have no idea if the market's going to sell off tomorrow. I have no idea if Mr. Market's not going to like something next week, right? You just plan accordingly, right? And you run a little bit of a scenario analysis, and that's it. I mean, you're going to, I try to make adjustments and kind of add to my cash balance, as we go a little bit higher and have some dry powder for a dip. But I can't, I'm going to try to stay with this market as long as possible, but I'm not going to get over the tips of my skis in terms of risk, right? So it's important to kind of think about these things, because really, you're just not going to. What will happen one day is there'll be a sell program, right? And people will probably say, "Oh, somebody's selling. Let me get out of some of my risk." Right? Oh, let me get out of some of my risk too. And it may not even be. It may be such a small story that does it, but that's how it happens, right? Because I mean, do you remember why this happened? So yeah, my point with FedEx is there's nothing. Why is it down? Just because there's no more buyers right now at this second in FedEx, right? But do you remember what caused this? Or what caused this? Well, something minuscule, right? We were just, due for a pullback, right? And that's all that happens. And we can't control that, or the market's reaction. What we can control is how much we risk. So that said, I know sometimes I get compliments about this stuff. Sometimes people just want me to talk about trade setup. So I'll do that. I'll talk about some of the things that I'm looking at besides the home builders. XME did not really work. I actually purchased a little bit of the silver miners, as we talked about in yesterday's video. They had some legs to them, right? So the AG that I talked about, which saw some big call buying, was up about 4.9%, right? We talked about silver too. Silver's still moving here. I think silver gets to 27.25, right? So very strong. I didn't trade anything in the gold miners, but they look okay. The silver miners, again, I don't really know the reason why, and I don't really care about the reason why, but they look stronger, right? All we're doing. I like to have some intuition, obviously, but a lot of this, sometimes it's better if you just don't know the reason, right? And you're just following the trend a little bit. So, that's where I think that could get to in terms of silver. Somebody asked me about Bitcoin, right? So I'll try to address this. I had Bitcoin as the chart of the day about 3 days ago, right? It had pulled back, and you could see I actually posted this on Twitter, right? It's funny how this always how this works. I always seem to get questions after something has gone up like 20%, right? So I get it, because sometimes you feel like, oh, I don't have a position in this, and everybody's talking about it, and I'm not in it. What I would say, right, and I don't have any problem with going long, Bitcoin for the long term, but if you have to chase a little bit, you do it with a small position, right, and then you wait for a move down. This happens in Bitcoin and same thing with gold. You'll get your chance, right? You just have to be patient, right? Remember this day when everybody was like, what is that? This type of thing happens from time to time in Bitcoin. Somebody sells like crazy, one night, whether it's a central bank or somebody else. Same thing happens in the gold market, right? Somebody will just decide that they need to take profits in something, and it gets hit, right? Now, this ended up being a buying opportunity. Now, if you miss this and if you don't want to buy because, this was a massive move this one day, you still had the chance in here, right? And I had talked about it. I almost put GBTC, which is the Bitcoin Trust, in the TTG trend portfolio, but, uh, you know, it just didn't happen. I did a rebalance earlier in the week, and I don't really have an excuse. I looked at doing it, and I just didn't put it in. So shame on me for not putting it in the TTG trend portfolio. But you had the opportunity, right? You had all these hammer bars, right? And then we gapped up here. You still could have put it on a little bit, right? But you're just not going to find a perfect time. If you like something, sometimes you have to chase a little bit. But for me, like from a trading aspect, I would never put on a full position, after something is up this much, right? You be patient, right, and let it come into you, right? And if you're okay putting on like maybe 10% of your position here, right? Again, I would not chase here, but if you really wanted to get into Bitcoin, put on a tiny position and then wait for it to come to you. Because that's generally what happens. But it's like anything too. It's the same thing with the market too. Everybody says, "Oh, if I could always get a dip, I would be thrilled to get in." Right? But I didn't really hear too many people buying on this, right? And even when I sent this out earlier in the week on Twitter, Bitcoin, it kind of got crickets. I said, "Hey, look at this. It's moving into the 20-day moving average." Right? Usually that's a good buy place in an uptrend. Really didn't get much attention. And that was at 18,000 and things up to 22. Now, if there's obviously other plays for this, right? So there's the Mara, right? But these are really high speculative names, right? It's tough to really take a big position in something like this, right? It's a pure momentum name. Who knows what they're actually doing with Bitcoin? It's same thing with the Riot blockchain, right? This company has like what, 9 people that they employ. Just because it says blockchain on it, right? People buy it. So what I did this week, I'll tell you what I did. More of an indirect play, but in a name that I like anyway. I went long PayPal, right? And this worked very well, right? So PayPal, and Square being able to transact in these things, that's the play for me, right? That may not be as sexy as going long, Amara, but I don't, I get it, $5 to $9, but really, are you really going to throw $10,000 into a company that, how many employees does this one have? Right? So you size these things appropriately. Nobody says that, you can't participate in these things with like $1,000 or something. But they have 3 as of the end of last year. They have 3 employees, right? So if that makes you really excited, right, about going long this company with 3 employees, have a ball, right? But it doesn't in this market currently. It doesn't really matter, right? For something that goes from 5 to you could do your analysis and say, hey, I'm not going to buy a company that has 3 employees, and that's kind of how I am, right? But you miss out on something that does this. You just have to, if you're going to participate in something like this, you take profits, right? When you've got a move like this, right? And that's the way I would say it. And again, I think my 2 favorite plays in this group, again, are a little bit conservative, are the Square and the PayPal. That said, I took my profits in PayPal, right? Even though I'm a big PayPal bull, and I've got some in the TTG trend portfolio, which is our stock, right? Which is our stock portfolio. I'm still long. I have both of these in the TTG trend portfolio, right? That portfolio has what? How many names do we have in this thing? 20. I think we might actually be up to 30 names in this. I'm drawing a blank, right? But that's the way I do it. And in the trading account, right? I took profits, right? I had a position on a couple days ago. I started a position, added into some weakness, right? I was in the March 240s. So, by the way, this is a great way to kind of stay in a position, right? In the 240s, if you think there's more upside, what you do is you could take the trade off, right? If you're worried that this is a lot of risk for an option, What I do is I roll it, right? So I roll it into a higher strike. I talked about this in yesterday's video too, but so 10.30, and then I take a little bit of profits there, and then for today, I took the rest of this trade off, $14 for 10.30. So again, it's rolling is a phenomenal way to stay in a position while locking something in. All right, so that's my thoughts on Bitcoin. I hope that helps a little bit. A little bit. All right. This apps, right? Look at this thing, 53 bucks, amazing, right? This is a trade I've had on for what, about 2-3 weeks. Took a little bit of time, to kind of back checked, for about a week, right? Made this. I think I put it on somewhere. And what's my cost basis in this one? 39.90. Right. So I got in here, right? 39.9. So I think right on here, right? It was like right before the weekend or something, right? And it made a nice move, took some profits, and then it sat back down here, consolidated, and then has just taken off. Really, really nice. And I did put this one. I also added apps into this TTG trend portfolio, right? In this, so I do that a lot, right? When I I'll tend to take profits quicker in my trading account, on a swing trade, and then if I really like what's going on and if it's got a really strong trend, I stick it in the trend portfolio, right? And that's a portfolio that I don't look at every 10 minutes like I do in my trading account. So I can just ride the trend like PayPal and Square, right? I talked about the solar ETF earlier this week too, which I had on both in my trading account and in the trend portfolio, right? So I'm taking profits, got a little bit bigger of exposure, obviously, in my trading account, but I took this one off, right? This was a position I put on less than a week ago, on Friday, right? Or just a week ago, right? For 84.60, out for 93. All right. If I won't go over. Obviously, you could see I started to kind of just get rid of some positions. This Reggie, of course, I've talked about this one a couple times this week, but just continuation. I'm happy, right? And with this, right? Could it go higher? Yes, right. And that's kind of the thought on the overall market too, right? One of the things. Here's my comments, by the way, at the end of the day for members. Where's my commentary, right? Here's my kind of little bit of stupid humor. I said also at this stage, point in the rally, in my opinion, you should be nice and relaxed, right? Having locked in or booked a lot of gains and starting to kind of feel jolly going into the holidays, right? In my opinion, there's no reason to press here. Participating, which is what I'm doing, is fine. And again, I'm fully at this point. Do I want to pull back right this second? No, but I'm okay with that at this point. We've gone up so much, right? So I'm okay with a little bit of backing and filling at this point. So as I said earlier in the video, once you get to that point where you're not stressed and worried what's going to happen tomorrow with the market, you're in a pretty damn good place, right? So just a couple other trades. There was some. Decent amount of weekly calls went up, not this week, but next week's calls in MasterCard. It's kind of tough with the short-term calls. I took a short-term call position in this, and sometimes, if the stock doesn't move, you're going to lose the money on your premium. So what I always say whenever you're participating in short-term stuff, you have to be comfortable with like a full loss, because sometimes the stock just doesn't move, right? Whenever you're in short-term options, you need two things to happen. You need the stock to move, and you need to get the timing right too, right? So that's tough to get two things right. That's why whenever I trade short-term options, it's always for an amount that I'm comfortable losing the whole premium. It's the only way that I've learned how to do it over the years, right? Because you just can't predict when you're going to get to get both right all the time is impossible, right? Just to let you know, like if you're new to trading options, to get both of these things correct all the time is very, very difficult. Some of the best traders out there, and I'm not talking about the numbnuts on Twitter. I'm talking about, and you could put Kathy Wood in this, right? You could put Warren Buffett, Stan Druckenmiller, David Tepper, right? Those guys, some of the best traders out there. They can't, they're not going to get their timing perfect either, right? So keep that in mind. It's one of those things that's really helped me over the years with short-term option trading. I only put in what I'm willing to lose whenever I take those trades, and that's not what I do the majority of the time. Will I take one of those trades every now and then? Sure. I took one today, right? And this is how I phrase it. Short-term high-risk trade size appropriately, right? That's that. I also took a little bit of Fastly calls today too. Right, so I'm okay playing a little bit of the short-term stuff. Um, what else? UPS was a nice little trade too. Going into FedEx numbers. I took off this U trade for now, so it's good to kind of go over some ones that Oh, actually, you hung in there. Look at that. So, but maybe one that I watch for tomorrow, Unity Software. So it'll be on the list. Here's like a couple of the setups that I put in today too. I gave a little bit of, so even if you're a member and you didn't get a chance to see this, but I added a lot of notes on some things that I'm already planning, where to take the next target on SE, which I took another target today. A couple names that I'm not in, but I think are interesting is this APPN, right? Name that went berserk about a month ago and has been going sideways, right? I gave a trade idea on Shop, right? If you think Shop has more to go, an easy way to participate is a call spread, right? And something like this where it's a $1,180 stock. Fuel Cell and Plug were very strong today, right? So we're talking about that alternative energy. Nice move in Plug out to new highs. Fuel Cell trying to turn the corner. I took one target in this trade. I'm happy to stay in this and see if this thing can kind of rev up. My next target, which I mentioned on Twitter too, is going to be up at 965. Again, the market webs give you a roadmap of where to take targets. Really, really nice. All right, guys, that's it. This Cree worked, by the way. I talked about this in the room that we've been seeing some call activity. This thing was up about 5.6%. We caught that right here. This one I did not take. Because again, I can't take every single one of them. Another name that we talked about too is Wing. Had a huge day today. Again, I didn't participate in this one too, but provided a really nice signal yesterday, closed above here. I think I may have talked about that in yesterday's video. All right, guys, the video is 27 minutes long. I don't like to get these things over that long, but if you stayed with me through the whole video, thanks for watching. Have a great night, and I'll see you guys tomorrow for the end of the week.